Shadow Collector. Chapter 1. The ramshackle Victorian house stood solitary at the edge of the woods, decrepit and forgotten like the elderly woman who lived inside. Mara Elliot slowly limped across the creaking floorboards, clutching her cane with knotted fingers. She paused to light a candle, its flickering flame casting shadows across the peeling wallpaper and heaping piles of books. Her latest painting waited on the easel, not yet complete. Mara shuddered as she examined the image, a moonlit ritual deep in the forest, robed figures gathered in occult symbols painted in vivid crimson. She did not fully understand the visions that came unbidden, only that her cursed gift had returned. The candlelight glinted off the silver locket hanging around her neck, its oval surface etched with strange runes. Inside was preserved a lock of raven hair, the only memento of her little sister Isla after the tragedy that shattered her childhood. She could still hear Isla's faint cries as the robed cultists dragged her into the woods. The police blamed a wild animal, though they never found the body. With their father dead and mother institutionalized, Mara grew up alone in the cold care of orphanages. She quickly learned to hide her bizarre compulsions, painting her unseen visions to give them substance. Now in her 70s, she had chosen isolation, selling her disquieting works discreetly at the flea market. But lately, she felt the familiar energy again, clawing its way to the surface. The collector was back, and with it, the occult forces she had long suppressed. Mara feared what fate lay ahead as she struggled to steady her shaking hands. She could not avoid her role, for she was the only one who truly understood the danger rising in Blackwood. Chapter 2. Rachel Park flicked on the basement light of the police station, the fluorescent bulbs slowly flickering on to reveal rows of metal shelves, crammed haphazardly with boxes of old case files. She coughed as she shuffled past the outdated computer equipment and office furniture piled towards the back, looking for the box labeled Unsolved 1978 to 1982. As the newest detective in the small town of Blackwood, Rachel was tasked with digitizing their cold cases, an assignment she actually enjoyed. The reports helped her study up on how seasoned detectives approached leads, identified suspects, and built theories. She had high hopes of using this grunt work to earn her chance at leading an active investigation. Finding the right box, Rachel carried it upstairs to her desk. The file inside on Mara Elliot's 1978 disappearance had gone ignored for decades, but Rachel was determined to give it a fresh set of eyes. Isla was only 10 when she vanished near the woods at the edge of town. With no body or evidence, the case was left a mystery. Rachel opened the yellowed file, hoping to find some detail the original detectives had overlooked. Isla was survived by her 12-year-old sister Mara and their parents, Athena and Jasper Elliot. Rachel paused on the notes about the mother. Athena Elliot had a history of erratic, obsessive behavior, repeatedly claiming her daughters were psychic. She was institutionalized after Isla's disappearance for violent episodes where she carved strange symbols into the walls of their home with knives. Rachel frowned as she spotted the word cultist in the margin of the report. There could be more to this case than a wild animal. She began scribbling down questions to research further. Hours later, the police chief stuck his head in, meeting in 5 with the others about the whole disappearance. Rachel quickly jammed the dusty file into her bag before hurrying to the conference room. She would get to the bottom of what happened to Mara Elliot, whatever secrets it uncovered. Chapter 3. Rachel studied the solemn faces around the table as Chief Brady clicked through the sparse details they had on James Holt's baffling disappearance, the first in over 40 years. He was last seen leaving the local bar Saturday night by the other regulars before vanishing without a trace. There were no leads yet except a single stray shoe found at the edge of the woods. I want all of you recanvassing the area today. Someone had to have seen something, Chief Brady said gruffly, his craggy features set in a scowl. He clearly hated delivering such vague orders. Rachel knew the police force was overwhelmed. In a small town like Blackwood, violent crimes were practically non-existent. A case like this was unprecedented. Rachel raised her hand tentatively. Do we know if Holt had any arguments or altercations at the bar that night? The chief nodded in approval. Good thought, Park. Check with the other patrons, but it didn't seem like it. As the meeting concluded, Rachel hesitated before approaching the chief. I have a potential lead on an old case that could be related. Back in 1978, when Mara Elliot went missing near the same woods where Holt's shoe was found. Chief Brady raised an eyebrow in surprise. Elliot, before my time here, but I remember something about the mother being unstable. You really see a connection? It's a long shot, Rachel conceded, but both cases involve the woods and lack of a body or evidence. I'd like to interview the sister Mara again if she's still local. The chief looked reluctant, but then shrugged. Fine, but tread carefully if she's as eccentric as the mother. Stay focused on Holt for now. Rachel nodded, the warning clear. But her police training told her the past could illuminate the present darkness if given the chance. She would not let go of this lead so easily. There was more to both cases, she could feel it. Chapter 4. Rachel sat in her sedan outside the ramshackle Victorian perched at the tree line, working up the nerve to approach. She didn't know what to expect from Mara Elliot after so many decades had passed. The woman was now in her early 70s, a near lifelong resident of Blackwood, according to public records. Other than a brief marriage in her 20s, Mara seemed to have lived a quiet, solitary life. No close friends or relatives surfaced. Rachel knew she had to tread delicately with the sudden questions about her sister's long-ago disappearance. But any insight Mara could provide might prove invaluable in the Holt investigation. Taking a breath, Rachel walked up and knocked firmly on the weathered door. She heard shuffling footsteps before it slowly creaked open. Mara Elliott's slender frame was stooped with age, but her silver hair and pale green eyes still faintly resembled the photo in the case file. She watched Rachel warily. Miss Elliot, I'm Detective Rachel Park with the Blackwood Police Department. I'm reinvestigating your sister's disappearance from 1978 and hoped to speak with you. Mara's eyes flashed with a mix of pain and anger. That was a long time ago. Detective, the past is dead. Let it remain buried. She moved to close the door. Rachel gently put up a hand. Please, I know it's painful, but we just had another local man, James Holt, vanish near the same woods. Anything you remember could help. There might be a connection. Mara hesitated, uncertainty crossing her face. Finally, she stepped aside in silent invitation. The interior was cluttered with antiques, books, and occult oddities. Rachel followed her to the sitting room. Time to gain her trust. Chapter 5. Over cups of tea in surprisingly delicate china, Rachel gently guided Mara through memories of her sister and the night she vanished. Mara remained cagey, claiming her dysfunctional mother imagined Isla's psychic tendencies. She provided nothing useful until Rachel referenced the cultist note in the file. Mara froze, teacup clattering as she set it down. My mother was unstable, especially after my father died. She got those ideas from old books on the occult. the detective's speculations meant nothing. "Of course," Rachel said soothingly. "Still, I should learn more about the town's history and any rumors from back then. Local folklore can impact communities in unexpected ways. Will you tell me if you recall anything else?" Mara's expression darkened, but she nodded reluctantly. As Rachel left the ominous house, she felt both disappointed yet intrigued. Mara was clearly afraid of something buried in her past, but pressing further would have to wait. After leaving Holt's wife tearfully examining his belongings for clues, Rachel decided to check out the bar where he was last seen. The regulars muttered about how unusual his disappearance was, but nobody admitted noticing anything strange. One grizzled patron did reminisce about when Old Man Cutter went missing back in '59, but the others shushed him. Rachel made a note to check the cold case archives again when she got back. There could be more forgotten files linked to these woods. Her last stop was the town library, where she dug into the microfilm archives, scanning old newspaper stories for any useful history. A few grainy articles mentioned the Elliot case, but nothing substantial, until an 1885 piece on pantomancers, magicians, and illusionists performing across the country. One photograph showed a dark-robed hypnotist demonstrating his mentalist abilities to an enthralled crowd. Rachel specifically noted his symbol-lined cloak. Mara claimed her mother's cult talk was fantasy, but something told Rachel this case might require an openness to extreme possibilities. She was dealing with the unexplainable. Chapter 6. Over the next week, Rachel became a fixture at the local library, poring through archives for any hint about the wood's secrets. She learned that Blackwood started in the mid-1800s as a mill town, logging pines from the surrounding forest. Somewhere along the way, the forest gained an ominous reputation. She unearthed scattered stories of hauntings, missing pets and livestock, mystical rituals performed under the full moon. Most townspeople considered it tall tales and superstition, but the recurring themes nagged at Rachel. She needed something concrete. An old librarian finally pointed her to Edith Caldwell, the eccentric local historian who proudly traced her lineage back to the town's founders. Edith's rambling Victorian home overflowed with relics chronicling every aspect of Blackwood's history. Over strong coffee in the parlor, Rachel shared the old articles on pantomancers and asked about any secret occult practices. Edith's eyes lit up as she revealed that many influential early townspeople were rumored members of an ancient esoteric order, gathering in the deep woods to contact otherworldly entities through arcane rituals. She eagerly presented Rachel with her great-grandmother's journal describing cloaked figures dancing around bonfires chanting in an unknown tongue at their hidden forest site. "It's all merely legend, of course," Edith said with a knowing smile. "Though legends often hold buried truths, wouldn't you say?" Rachel nodded slowly. "Have there been any disappearances or odd events tied to these woods in the past?" Edith promised to dig through her family archives as Rachel left clutching photocopies of the journal pages. Feeling the unsettling possibility, she now pursued something beyond mortal explanation. Chapter 7. Rachel winced as Chief Brady's voice echoed down the hall of the station. "Park, get in here now." She dutifully presented herself at his office, where a red-faced Brady shoved a piece of paper at her. "Would you kindly explain why I just received this outrageous supply request for occult books and materials? Have you lost your mind chasing ghosts?" Rachel stood her ground as she gave her update on the ritual rumors and historical clues that warranted further occult research. The chief listened impatiently, arms crossed. "Enough." Brady cut her off. I put you on those cold cases to get you out of the way, not so you could harass an elderly woman about some nonsense her ancestors scribbled down. This is a waste of department resources. With respect, sir, we still have no substantial leads on hold, Rachel countered. I can't ignore connections to the past that might shed light on the present. Please give me a little more time. Brady scowled, clearly used to obedient deputies. You have 48 hours, he growled. After that, if this occult mumbo-jumbo continues, you're off the case permanently. Rachel fumed as she returned to her desk. She decided to pay another visit to Mara Elliot. Showing her the ritual information might trigger new memories. It was a risky move against the chief's orders, but she had to follow her gut. Lives depended on stopping whatever sinister force lurked in those woods. Chapter 8. Mara reluctantly agreed to meet Rachel again, this time on the neutral ground of the town square garden. As Rachel cautiously presented her research, she was surprised to see Mara grow pale but intensely focused. Vaughn was the fragile, elderly woman. Mara's gaze was piercing, her gnarled hands turning the photocopies over intently. Well, detective, you are certainly persistent, digging up the decay and rot of the past, but I'm afraid these fanciful tales and legends cannot help you find the missing man today. Her tone was sharp, dismissive. Rachel wondered at the intense reaction to stories most townspeople considered absurd fairy tales. Something about the hooded ritual imagery ringing true. She played her final card, hoping Mara would understand. Miss Elliot, I'm at risk of being removed from this investigation for even mentioning such things. But I strongly believe you and I both sense something beyond the ordinary is at play here, something people refuse to acknowledge. Let me help end its threat, but I need to know what you're so afraid of. Mara stared searchingly into Rachel's face for long moments before sighing deeply, her rigid posture sinking down in resignation. You remind me so much of myself when I was young and bold, thinking I could conquer the world's darkness, she murmured bitterly. Perhaps it is time to let the old shadows come into the light. But beware, detective, down that path you'll find damnation, not salvation. With that ominous warning, Mara rose abruptly and gestured for Rachel to follow. For the first time, she led her beyond the sitting room into the locked studio, revealing her life's work. Chapter 9. Dozens of paintings in various sizes leaned against the studio walls or lay half-finished on easels. Rachel studied them breathlessly, struck by the technical skill in depicting both tranquil forest scenes and unsettling occult rituals she recognized from the old town records. Many showed figures in dark robes bowing before a shadowy entity with a vaguely human shape, but distorted, shifting limbs fading off into wisps of gray mist. Their faces were blurred, except for the piercing void of the creature's hollow black eyes. Despite the fantastical subject, the images had visceral power, evoking both allure and dread. Where did you learn to paint like this? Rachel asked in awe. The details are incredible. Mara's eyes clouded. A terrifying gift awoke in me as a child, allowing me to see beyond the veil. What I witnessed lurking in those woods and beyond could drive anyone mad. My art became the only way to cling to sanity, using visions I never asked for. She gestured to a covered painting in the corner. But lately, the nightmare has returned. Lifting the sheet, she revealed a scene of James Holt, enveloped in the same swirling shadows, skeletal limbs clutching as his anguished face faded away. Rachel recoiled in shock. When did you paint this? It looks just like those ritual images. Dread crept up her spine, contemplating unexplainable skills. The compulsion starts as dreams, Mara whispered. But if I resist, the images overpower me while awake until I pick up the brush. Only then do I fully see what wants to be shown. She trembled slightly. Something has awoken again that you are powerless against. Flee this town, detective, and forget what you have learned here. Rachel stared at the painting, her tidy, rational world upended. Could Mara truly possess some supernatural gift? Or were these delusional works of obsession? Her gut still said Mara held the key to the truth, if Rachel could earn her full trust. She had one day left to convince the chief. Chapter 10. Rachel left Mara's house deep in thought. The muted terror in the woman's eyes was too real for simple madness. If the visions held some truth, pursuing the culprit could lead to a frightening confrontation unlike any Rachel had ever faced. But turning away and leaving victims to their fate was unthinkable. She paused at the edge of the woods, peering between the shadowy pines for any sign of the unknown threat haunting Blackwood. Owls hooted as the wind picked up, stray leaves swirling around her feet. Rachel shivered, but refused to give in to the trepidation coiling in her gut. Whatever darkness was hiding here, her missing persons case just became a murder investigation. She would see it ended, no matter the cost. With that solemn vow, Rachel turned her steps back to the station. There was still one path left to take in protecting this town. The next morning, Rachel stopped Chief Brady before he could launch into another tirade about her work. "Sir, I have a confession. I disobeyed your orders and consulted with Mara Elliot again regarding the occult connections." Brady's face purpled in outrage, but Rachel pressed on. "I take full responsibility, but hear me out. I've come to believe Mara is innocent in her sister's and Holt's disappearances. In fact, she may be the only one capable of stopping whoever or whatever is responsible." The chief stared at her incredulously. "Park, this better not be some excuse to keep spouting nonsense." "It's the truth, sir," Rachel said earnestly. "I believe Mara Elliot has a rare gift that outsiders could never understand, but it gives her insight into what haunts those woods. With her help, we can still find Holt and the others before it takes more lives." Brady scrutinized her face intently before throwing up his hands. "I hope you realize how insane this sounds, but my instincts say you're no fool. If you're convinced this woman can help, so be it. But the second I see this going off the rails, you're finished here, understood?" Rachel let out a deep breath. "Understood, sir, and thank you for the chance." She knew she was staking her career on a wild leap of faith in Mara's otherworldly skills. But Rachel's gut told her it was the only possibility left. She had to believe good could triumph, whatever form it took. Grabbing her keys, she set off to tell Mara she would no longer face the darkness alone. Chapter 11. Rachel outlined the latest Holt evidence to Mara, who listened silently, her face impassive. Since allowing Rachel into her studio, the woman had retreated back into a protective shell. But Rachel hoped she could convince Mara to willingly help the investigation. "I know you've suffered a heavy burden all these years from abilities beyond your control," Rachel appealed gently. "But you have a chance to use them for good now. We can stop whoever took your sister and the others, but I need your guidance." Mara's eyes flashed with anger. "And what makes you think I haven't tried?" She began pacing in agitation. "Do you imagine it was easy listening to my mother's ravings about our family's cursed bloodline, hiding my visions lest I be branded an unnatural freak?" Mara visibly calmed herself before continuing. "When Isla was taken, I was only a helpless child under the demon's spell. Now I am an old woman, and some horrors cannot be undone. Leave this madness be, detective, please." Rachel hesitated before deciding on complete candor. I understand your reticence, but I will proceed with or without your help. The question is which path leads me faster to the truth and saves lives. She stepped closer. You've borne this alone long enough. Help me end its grasp on you and this town for good. Mara searched her face with an unreadable expression. For a moment, Rachel thought she had failed to convince her. But then, Mara nodded slowly. Come back tonight, she said softly. I will try to seek its guise in my visions, but be warned, once you see its true nature, there is no forgetting. Rachel felt a chill at the words, but she managed a reassuring smile. Good and evil reveal their faces when pressed. Tonight, we shine a light bright enough to clear the shadows for good. Chapter 12. The moon filtered through the bare trees as Rachel pulled up to the hidden trail leading to the ritual site described in Edith's family journals. Mara had directed her here, insisting on meeting in the woods to better channel its resonance. Rachel wished they had backup, but Mara refused to involve anyone else. The shattered stump of a lightning-struck pine marked the path. Rachel followed it warily, one hand on her holstered gun. The winding trail ended abruptly in a small clearing, the gap in the trees opening to the glittering expanse of the night sky. Rachel inspected the ring of stones and scorched earth indicating bonfires long extinguished. Mara stood stiffly in the center, arms raised as she chanted indistinct words under her breath. The air felt charged, prickling Rachel's skin as the branches bent and swayed in a sudden gust of wind. Mara? Rachel called uncertainly. Did you learn anything? Mara slowly turned, her eyes now glassy black pools. When she spoke, her voice echoed as if from the bottom of a well. Many souls have fed the collector's hunger. Its time comes again. Before Rachel could react, Mara seized her arm with unnatural strength. Shadows twisted around them, solidifying into smoky tendrils that seared icy pain wherever they touched Rachel's skin. She cried out, but Mara held her in an iron grip. In the darkness, a pair of glowing red eyes watched hungrily. Chapter 13. Rachel struggled against Mara's vice-like hold, the swirling shadows tightening around them. She had to break the trance controlling the older woman. Mara, listen to me, Rachel shouted desperately. This thing wants to destroy you too. You have the power to fight it. No reaction, just Mara's unrelenting grip as the shadowy limbs slithered closer, hungry and grasping. Red eyes bored into Rachel's soul, forcing images of her worst fears into her mind: failure, helplessness, isolation. She pushed back, seeking the light still left inside. You are stronger than this demon, Rachel yelled, straining against Mara with all her might. Your gift is not a curse, but a way to guard others' hopes and dreams, reclaim what was stolen from you. With a gasp, Mara released her hold. The probing shadows wavered as Mara closed her eyes, clenching her fists and beginning to glow with a warm light that strengthened as she chanted unfamiliar words. Bathed in the protective aura, the smoky tendrils recoiled with an unearthly screech before dissolving away entirely. Mara collapsed breathlessly as the red eyes winked out. Rachel caught her, the trees around the clearing still swaying as if shaking off the evil presence. Mara touched Rachel's arm, where the icy shadow had burned her skin, leaving red marks. I'm so sorry for what almost happened here tonight, but you freed me from its control when I could not break those chains alone. You were right about my power's purpose. I can never repay you for that precious gift. Rachel clasped her hand tightly. The only repayment I need is seeing justice done and Blackwood safe again. Mara nodded, steely resolve settling on her weary features. Then let us finish this once and for all. Chapter 14. Mara insisted on returning home to gather eldritch components from her occult library, giving Rachel time to process the night's events. She waited nervously in the parlor, gun loaded with talisman rounds Mara had blessed. According to her new ally, regular firearms would have no effect on the demonic entity Mara called the Collector. Rachel's logical mind rebelled at trusting folk rituals over proven police arms and tactics. But she had witnessed Mara's power with her own eyes. If this creature had escaped ordinary ways of tracking and capture, she needed to adapt. Vowing to keep an open mind, Rachel inspected the engraved bullet casings. Each one had a strange glyph that seemed to shimmer with energy. Mara soon returned carrying an ancient leather bundle. "We cannot expect your fellow officers to believe the enemy we face," she said solemnly. "But there are those in this town who will stand with me to protect it from the darkness, as their ancestors did generations ago." Rachel nodded slowly as she realized Mara meant the secretive esoteric group her paintings depicted. If they understand the threat, we'll need all the help we can get. A question occurred to her. This demon, why take some, but not others? How does it select its victims? Mara's eyes darkened. It does not take randomly. The Collector is drawn to those who shine, pure souls, vibrant creative spirits, great capacity to inspire others. It consumes their energy greedily to fuel its powers. She touched her silver locket. "Children like Isla attract it deeply. We must not let another light go out tonight." Rachel squeezed her shoulder, moved by the shared grief that had shaped them both. "Let's go end this." Chapter 15. The dilapidated warehouse on the edge of town looked grimly fitting for a showdown with a soul-devouring demon. Rachel watched anxiously as Mara performed a ritual to summon the Collector, using arcane chants and burning powders. Several robed figures stood silently in the shadows, revealing only weathered hands clutching talismans. Mara had warned that directly engaging the Collector was extremely dangerous and only a last resort if they could not track its lair through supernaturally enhanced visions. But Rachel sensed Mara was obsessed with destroying the demon. Consequences be damned. She hoped the woman's feelings wouldn't blind her to unnecessary risks. Flames shot up from the binding circle Mara had cast, bringing Rachel's focus back. The warehouse walls groaned as shadows writhed across them, condensing into clawed arms and leering faces. Mara's voice rose louder, commanding the demon's obedience. Rachel's finger rested on the talisman gun's trigger as the unearthly shapes howled furiously. Suddenly, the shadows pulled away from Mara's power, funneling together into one giant pair of glowing crimson eyes. A voice like stones crushing bones reverberated through the room. "Foolish mortal, you cannot command what is beyond you." The eyes turned hungrily towards Rachel. "But we thank you for this offering. Her light will sustain us long." Gunshots exploded as Rachel emptied her clip into the shifting form. It recoiled with an enraged scream before dissolving into smoke. Mara urgently motioned for Rachel to join her within the protected circle. "Its appetite is not yet sated," she warned. "We must go to the source." Mara's face was haggard, but fiercely determined. Rachel nodded, staunching her doubts. There was no turning back from this course. She could only hope Mara had the strength left to navigate the dark waters ahead. Chapter 16. Passing the tree line felt like crossing into another world entirely. Rachel stayed close behind Mara, leaves and soil muffling their steps. The woods were unnaturally still, no animals or wind. Even the stars were dimmed by the dense canopy overhead. They moved steadily downward into a ravine, following the flickering will-o'-the-wisps that appeared to guide their path. Rachel glanced back nervously as the lights vanished, leaving them in total darkness save for Mara's lantern. The narrow trail ended at a massive oak door recessed into the ravine wall. Strange runes covered its surface, glowing red at their approach. Mara raised her lantern higher, features set like stone. Beyond this portal lies the collector's domain. Once we cross, it will sense our presence. Be prepared. Rachel steeled herself and nodded. Mara pushed the glowing door open. The chamber inside was a disorienting twisted space, like walking through warped funhouse mirrors. Ghostly figures sat motionless along the rocky walls, desiccated shells with just the faintest outlines of souls still trapped within. Rachel realized with horror that these were the collector's victims, consumed over centuries. "Welcome." The voice oozed from the walls as shadowy limbs materialized, grabbing Rachel and dragging her towards the center. She screamed Mara's name, firing her gun blindly. A guttural laugh echoed as icy bands paralyzed Rachel's limbs. She gazed up helplessly as the collector's burning red eyes appeared before her. "Here you will feed my power eternally," it gloated. Suddenly, Mara was there, eyes blazing white as she shouted arcane words of banishment. The collector shrieked, forced to release Rachel, who crawled desperately from its reach. Mara advanced, power radiating, as she relentlessly drove the entity back into the shadows. Chapter 17. Rachel watched in awe as Mara manifested her full abilities against the retreating collector. Fawn was the frightened, traumatized woman. In her place stood a guardian of light, banishing the demonic creature from the souls it had hoarded. With a final ancient symbol blazing on her brow, Mara sealed the howling collector back to the nightmare realm it crawled from. The lair trembled as its unholy energy dissipated. Mara hurried to help Rachel up. "We must leave now. The way will not remain open long." They rushed from the accursed prison, Mara sealing the portal behind them. Rachel gulped the clean night air in relief as Mara sagged against a tree. Concerned, Rachel went to assist her, but Mara waved her off. "I am well," she said with a weak smile. "Just exhausted from tapping into power long denied." Rachel squeezed her shoulder gently. "You were incredible back there. I don't know how I can ever repay you." Mara shook her head. "Seeing you safe and free is reward enough. You reminded me that hope endures, however deep the shadows grow. I had forgotten that truth." She turned her face up to the starlit sky peeking through the trees. "When I was young, frightened of my own gifts, I wished only to be normal, ignorant of these forces. But now I understand my purpose. I was chosen to walk between worlds and bear the mystic light against the darkness." Mara clasped Rachel's hand firmly. "We all have roles to play. Never forget yours." Rachel nodded, humbled by Mara's wisdom and grace under such harrowing trials. Together, they turned homeward. Chapter 18. Rachel sipped coffee in Mara's kitchen, still processing the night's events. With the collector banished, James Holt and the other missing souls should be returned safely. She longed to tell the chief everything but knew he would never believe what had really happened. Mara entered solemnly. You have a decision to make, detective. Your superiors will have many questions that we cannot answer honestly without revealing my abilities. She fixed Rachel with an intense gaze. I leave it to you to decide if that is for the best. Either choice has consequences we must accept. Rachel weighed Mara's words carefully. If the occult truth emerged, the woman would become a pariah, hounded relentlessly by media and others who did not understand. Rachel had a duty to uphold the law, but she also owed Mara for saving countless lives. You lived your whole life hiding this side of yourself and were hurt deeply because of it, Rachel said finally. I won't be the one to destroy your chance at peace. We tell only what people can accept. The rest remains between us. Relief washed over Mara's face. She clasped Rachel's hand. You are wise beyond your years. Come, we have much to do before the dawn. Rachel's heart felt light knowing Mara could finally stop looking over her shoulder at the world's cruelty. They would face whatever came next together. Chapter 19. Mara insisted on being present when James Holt was found to provide closure for them both. As police hauled equipment into the woods seeking the reported body, Rachel stayed close, worried the strenuous night had taken too great a toll on her aged friend. But Mara stood tall and silent, needing to witness the collector's demise firsthand. When the recovery team brought Holt's unconscious form from the ravine's opening, Rachel heard Mara's breath catch as the stretcher passed. Rachel gently squeezed her arm in support. Let the healing begin, she whispered. Mara could only nod, overcome with emotion. Rachel knew this was the absolution she had long prayed for. With Holt stabilized at the hospital, Rachel debriefed the baffled chief, letting Mara fill in vague details about following hunches through the woods. In the end, Brady was simply relieved to have rescued a victim and closed the troubling case. I don't need the full story, only results, he declared. But good work, both of you. Afterwards, Mara asked Rachel to drive her to the hidden ritual site. The lightning-struck pine loomed taller than ever against the brightening sky. Mara knelt solemnly and buried her charms and occult tools beneath the roots. A new era dawns, she said quietly. My time as gatekeeper against the shadow realm has ended, but the battle is won. Rachel helped her stand, both gazing ahead to the light filtering through the trees leading back home, where hope and life awaited. Chapter 20. Over the next few weeks, Rachel was thrilled to see Mara transform into a vibrant, engaged member of the community. She took up gardening and volunteered at the library, becoming a fixture at town events. The haunted, guarded edges Rachel first encountered were replaced by open warmth. As Mara grew more outgoing, she shared her lifelong love of painting and even submitted works to the local art gallery after Rachel's gentle encouragement. To everyone's astonishment, her pieces began selling almost immediately to collectors from across the country. On opening night of Mara's show, Rachel helped her hang the last canvases, now showcasing bright natural vistas. I'm so proud of you embracing your gifts, Rachel told her. Mara smiled graciously, though her eyes carried a trace of melancholy. For the first time, creating art feels like opening my heart, rather than closing it off from the world. Though I cannot deny part of me mourns the closing of that mystical chapter. But better to learn my limits than overreach in hubris. Rachel nodded in understanding. Just don't forget, you're the master of your fate now, come what may. Mara took her hand, regarding the busy patrons admiring her works. With such steadfast friends beside me, I have no doubt this peace shall hold. Rachel knew Mara's path would have ups and downs ahead, but her spirit would stay strong. Once chained in darkness, she was finally free to guide her own destiny. Chapter 21. While Mara's new life in the light grew brighter each day, Rachel felt increasingly plagued by doubts. She went through the motions at the station, but was distracted thinking about the supernatural forces still existing unseen alongside the ordinary world. Her sleep became troubled with strange dreams where shadowy figures called to her from the woods. Rachel knew it was only restless guilt over keeping secrets from those who trusted her. But the unease persisted. After waking in a cold sweat from visions of sinking into a dark lake, Rachel finally broke down and went to Mara's cottage after work. The artist was happily covering her hands in clay as she molded pottery. Concern filled her face when she saw Rachel's haggard appearance. Rachel confessed her struggles with maintaining the covert occult aspects of their ordeal. I just wish there was someone else I could talk to about everything we experienced. The secrecy doesn't feel right. Mara listened thoughtfully, letting Rachel unburden her conflicted conscience. When she finished, Mara spoke carefully. Our actions have weighed on me as well. Perhaps certain trusted souls could be brought into the circle to help share the load. She squeezed Rachel's shoulder. You've carried far too much alone already, but choose wisely. This knowledge is not for everyone. Rachel let out a deep breath, feeling the knot in her chest loosen. I think I know where to start. Thank you, Mara. The older woman smiled warmly. We guardians must hold each other upright during the storms. Now, stay for tea and tell me more about these dreams. Rachel left that night with firm purpose. She would find a way to reconcile duty and truth. Mara had reminded her that she didn't have to walk her path alone. There was always light to be found if you knew where to look. Chapter 22. Rachel took Mara's advice to heart and opened up carefully to Chief Brady first, framing the metaphysical aspects as mysteries beyond current understanding. To her surprise, the chief accepted that police work did not have all the answers yet, and told her that justice sometimes required nuance. Feeling bolder, Rachel next brought Edith Caldwell into their confidence, knowing the historian would embrace the town's hidden occult legacy with scholarly fascination, helping to guide its energy toward positive growth rather than fear. With Mara's blessing, Rachel and Edith selected a few other open-minded souls to quietly form a circle of guardians, carrying on the vigilance against threats from realms beyond the flesh. Mara provided counsel and talismans to aid their humble cause. As Rachel arrived one night at the ritual site for their gathering, she felt her spirit lifting to see friends old and new united by compassion and wisdom. Mara clasped her hand proudly. You've brought together an unlikely flock, the elder guardian teased gently. Rachel shrugged. The mission drew kindred spirits. We're kindred in wanting to walk in hope, not fear. Mara's face grew solemn. That choice confronts us all, and hope is only possible when forged through courage and care for others. Their circle linked hands, bathed in starlight filtering through the pines. Rachel knew challenges awaited both human and otherwise. But together, they would light the way. The end.